of Getting Unstuck with Misfits Unplugged, where we cover the journeys of career rebels who have overcome challenges, who have faced adversity, and who are winning. Today, our special guest is Miss Porsche Wilson, who is the Senior Vice President of the Office of Customer Satisfaction for a financial institution. She is an Army officer, a mom, a wife, and we all know how all of that can be a mix. And today we are going to talk about her wonderful journey through finance and military and how she got to where she is today. So welcome, Portia.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Excited to talk to y'all today.
So we're going to jump right in. And a lot of people, so for the audience, Portia and I were like best friends when we were like, in first, second, third, fourth grade. Like, so she is a childhood friend, but she's also killing it in the finance space. And I think that it's really important for us to make sure that we talk to our audience about our, struggles and our triumphs as women of color, trying to ascend through corporate America. And so I want, before we jump into all the other stuff, just to give some background on your particular journey. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your military stint, and how you got into finance?
Yeah, so it's a really weird path. And it was just always like one decision just led to the next thing, which I went from being a biology major in college all the way to being in banking. And so started off in college, like I said, as a biology major, went away to school. Like Brandy said, we grew up and we all like turned 18, graduated from high school. We left Dayton. We're from Dayton, Ohio. Shout out to Dayton, Ohio. I always got to shout out the hometown. But, but went to school and Brandy, I don't know if you remember this, but as a child, I used to say I was going to be a doctor.
I do.
Yeah,
I do actually. And she was smart enough for a child. Like,
I was like medical school bound. And then, of course, you know how people always say you should always tell God your plans and then he's going to laugh at it. And so I got to college. I had to major in biology. It was biology pre-med. And halfway through college, I decided, I think it was, if I'm being honest, I was probably sick of going to school. And the thought of 4 more years of school plus residency before I could even start my life just kind of felt daunting. And so I also developed a love for laboratory science, more so than clinical science. So I started working in the lab halfway through college, and I also needed a way to finish paying for college. So I had an academic scholarship, and halfway through, I lost that, partying a little bit too much. And I needed a way to finish paying for school. And so I found out about the Army ROTC program. And the way that works is you take a scholarship, they pay for your school, and then you owe them time. When you graduate, you commission as a commissioned officer, which means you're immediately trained and groomed to be put into a leadership position. So you're kind of in charge of the troops. So I went into the military because I definitely owed them an active duty commitment. And I was in the medical service corps, so still science and medical related, but really more of a healthcare administrator working in a military hospital, a field hospital, a deploying hospital. Did a tour in Iraq 1 year in Baghdad, Iraq, and came back. Basically did 4 years of active duty in the military and just decided that, I had just gotten married. We were getting ready to start a family and all that back and forth. Like my husband had gone, then I went overseas and he went overseas again. And we managed to make a baby somewhere in between all of that. And I just decided that I didn't want that life for us and he didn't want that life for us. And so we heard about this headhunter program that we got a part of, that they look for the leadership skill that comes with a military officer, a junior military officer. And I went to a hiring conference where I interviewed with a bunch of companies, and there was a bank that was there and they had a manager trainee program. And, they're like, oh, so, you're interviewing with all these companies, and they're like, well, why do you want to be in banking? And I'm like, I never wanted to be in banking, but leadership is a transferable skill across all industries. No matter whether it's banking or construction or engineering or whatever, even in medicine, there's always someone that's in charge that has to make decisions and run the operation. And so that's kind of how I sold myself. I left that interview thinking, I'm not going to get this job, because I told that man I did not want to work in a bank. And I got the job. And so went through a manager training program with this particular bank and started in operations. and started my way from the bottom as a young frontline manager. And here I am now as a senior vice president in the Office of Customer Satisfaction. That's a fancy word for working with complaints. Everybody that I talk to on any given day, they're mad about something. And we're just out here trying to support customers and advocate for them.
So you actually started going into my question that I was going to ask you was, you went from medical and we got some insight about your background. So what do you think are those transferable skills? But now, since you answered the question, I want to know what was some of the natural skill sets that you had that you harnessed and developed into your career. So if we have younger audiences like that don't have a clue where they want to go, what they want to do when they grow up, like some of the things that we have naturally end up being careers for the folks who are really successful or happy in their career.
Yes, great question. Because you're right. I think going to college or even leaving high school, even if college is not your thing, and at the age of 18, having to figure out and decide what you want to do for the rest of your life is really unrealistic. Like Brandy and I were talking about, like, all my life. I went 18 years. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a doctor. And then I got away from home and was like, I don't want to be a doctor anymore. You know, so the natural skills that I had were my leadership qualities. I didn't always channel them in the best way. When I was younger, I would get into trouble a lot in school. I was very talkative. But one of the things that my teachers would always tell my mom when I would get in trouble was that I had the power to influence people. And so I would open up my mouth and again, I would say something and the whole class would just be shut down. And so it was one of those things as I got older, I needed to learn how to take that level of influence and use it for good, combined with, like, I like to be a fixer. And I think that comes from being raised by a single mom, not having a man in the house to do things. If something broke, we would fix it, like literally fix it in the house. And we would like Cliff Huxtable everything. It would work and then it wouldn't work, but we would try it and, you know, we'll try to fix it. If not, well, we'll just have to buy a new one. We're going to try to fix this vacuum cleaner before we buy a new one. And so just taking those natural things that were with me throughout my life, I realized that I love to lead and develop people into being their very best selves. And also I love to take processes and workflow and like fix things. I like a problem. I'm a problem solver.
That's awesome because, and Isabel and I are both in finance, but I would say that that is a thing that all three of us have in common. Like both of us are in operations, and I would say that that's some of the breadcrumby kind of stuff that we like to do too, all of the fixing and all that good stuff. So I have so many questions, but before I get ahead of myself, and I don't want to go too far into your story without touching on how did the military help you in your quest for leadership and all that stuff. And I don't know how different the military is today as it was maybe when you started, but for, you know, the young kid, because we talk to a lot of colleges, so we may have some people who are young, who are still trying to make that decision as to whether or not that's a good thing for them. Like, how did it help? And were there any challenges in that in terms of incorporating it into your career?
So I will probably say that if it weren't for the military, I may not be where I am today. And that's not to say that I wouldn't be successful, but I know what I learned and the ways in which I grew from being in the military were definitely a reason why I am where I am today. And I think the first thing that it gave me was probably discipline. I needed discipline. Really. I was kind of I was a good girl, but I was just kind of wild in a way. And I went to college and was just all over the place, not focused, not disciplined with my work, not disciplined with how I just behaved socially. And the military cleaned a lot of that up for me. And so it brought structure and order into my life. But then it also taught me how to channel those leadership qualities, because whether you like it or not, you get commissioned as an officer, they put you on the job and you are expected to do the job. And you're gonna do the job. And it's not like in corporate America where you do the job and you get fired. Like technically you can, but it takes a lot to get fired from the military. You typically have to like commit a crime or something, or you're dishonorably discharged, which is not good. And so it's one of those things where you can't get out of this. You've got to figure it out. And really, it took me, again, being disciplined, learning how to channel those leadership skills to have to make decisions, and also do that in an environment where people are losing lives, and people's lives depend on it. And I'll never forget, I was 24, I had arrived at my duty station in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And literally I got there in April, and we were going straight into like pre-deployment activities. Like, we're going to be gone by Christmas. Like, we're spending Christmas in Iraq. And I'm like, what? Okay, so then I had to hurry up and get married, because I was going to get married the following Memorial Day. They're like, you're not going to be here Memorial Day weekend. But I remember talking to my superior officers, and he was like, I need you to understand how important your job is, because you're going to be in this job. I was a medical logistician, which means I was responsible for providing all of the drugs, all of the medical supplies, oxygen, all of those things that are needed to make a hospital function. And I'm a brand new second lieutenant. I remember one of the sergeant majors, like, I got boots older than you. And like, I need you to understand that you can bring the hospital to its needs. So the first thing I learned then, and if I didn't even call it mentorship, but hindsight being 2020, it was mentorship. I found people who had been in the Army for 20 years, and I like became their shadow. And like, I was like where they went, I went. And it was interesting. It's an interesting dynamic, because when there's a commissioned officer, and then there's a non-commissioned officer. So the commissioned officer who's in charge, and they would say like the commissioned officer, is the strategizer, and they make the orders, and they come up with the vision and the strategy for the unit. But the non-commissioned officer is the executor. It's kind of like the deputy to the sheriff. And so I would go find like those non-commissioned officers, and particularly Black females who look like me. And I would be like in tears, crying, like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I just got married. I miss my husband. I don't want to be here. I'm in Iraq. I want to go home. I can't even go to Walmart. And they're like, listen, ma'am, get your together. Get it together. If you can cry all you want, but don't you cry in front of these people. Get it together. We will teach you, and we'll help you become your very best. And it was just learning that in leadership, you still have to follow other people and listen to other people. I think I've rambled and kind of got off the subject, but really, those are the things that really, I think when I left the military, I took with me. One, literally turning wrenches. Like, I'm never going to ask anyone to do something that I wouldn't do myself. And that comes from being a junior officer, having to work in the motor pool and turn wrenches with soldiers. The other thing was, again, even when you're in leadership, you have to listen and learn. Everybody, you can learn from anybody, whether you're in charge of them, not like these people called me ma'am by virtue of rank, but they knew more than I knew. And my success depended upon me listening to them and learning from them. And they really could have left me out there just to dry. And and it could have been bad for my career. But just knowing when you need people, and regardless of you treat people with respect, and know that you can learn from them and still lead them at the same time.
I agree with you on the recruiting of military veterans, because a lot of the resumes that I get and see that has someone that was honorably discharged and all of those transferable skills and discipline, because that's the first thing that comes up in my mind when I see a veteran, especially the length of time that they were there. What are their, how many times were they promoted, and what do they oversee, or their rank? So kudos to you in there. And I was just going to compliment you when you hear another leader speak, and such a charismatic leader, that you're commanding of a room, and that you are not just, there's so many different types of leaders too. There's the ones that are just doing, then there's transformational leaders. So in just a couple of minutes of getting to know you, I can already see you commanding a room and developing people, change management, having them come along with you versus you telling them what to do. So kudos to anyone that's listening, because that's the way you talk to your teams to get them to do what you want. So I was going to pivot a little bit because we've done Happy Path and learning, your upbringing all the way to where you are current state. And for anyone who's watching us on YouTube, there's a beautiful little boy in the background on your pictures. So how are you?
There's one on each side.
Oh, there's two boys.
Yeah, those are my babies.
Okay. So I bring that up just to say, because Brandy and I are both moms to young children as well. And how are you balancing leadership, family, self-care, mindset, all of the things that you need to give 100% to on a day-to-day basis?
Oh my goodness. I think we are all still figuring that out. But, I think that you realize that not only your career, but also your home life has different stages. And so I I'm probably more focused in my career now than maybe when I started maybe 10 or 15 years ago, because I had little babies. Matter of fact, when I started in banking, I had a 3-year-old, and then 2 or 3 years later, I got pregnant and had another baby while I was still, in my job. And so having to deal with, a toddler and not sleeping at night and diapers I mean, I was a wild child. And so my babies were wild, and they got kicked out of daycare all the time. And I remember there were times when, my youngest, he had a stint in almost every daycare in the area. We lived outside of Birmingham for almost 10 years. And there were times where I kept a nap mat in my office at work. And I had really understanding leaders. And he would, I get the call, Brandon, bit somebody again. He's got to go home for the day. And it's like, well, I got work to do. I can't just go home. And this isn't, this is banking. You weren't working from home back in 2011, unless you were IT, or maybe HR. And so bringing him with me, laying him on the nap mat, turning the lights off, dim because he's sleeping and I'm working. But I just remember feeling that, he needs me, but my job needs me, and that stress of all of that. And literally, I think it becomes a balance of just understanding the stages and really understanding that you have to sacrifice somewhere, and as a mom, I just didn't want to sacrifice being a mom, but I also felt like I worked hard for my career. And so I did the best that I could do on both sides. And now that they're older, they're more, they're 17 and 12. And so I do have to be there for them, but they're not babies anymore. And there are no sleepless nights. And so I can kind of grind a little bit harder now at work than maybe what I could in the beginning. And understanding that it's a balance, it's a trade-off, it's a sacrifice. And sometimes your career, I won't say that it will suffer, but sometimes your career will get stagnant because of it. And I think we all know that as moms, that happens. And all that you can do is be the very best that you can be in both places at the same time. And know that, when you see a moment where, okay, the kids are good, now I can go, I can grind. Or, work, I'm going to be on autopilot at work because home, my kid is sick or whatever. I'm going to be mom today and I'm going to grind at home. And just understanding that give and take. And when those moments happen and you grind when you can grind.
That is awesome advice. I mean, particularly for two women who have young children, like waited, right? And so that stage you talking about is here at 40 something. Okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it
doesn't last forever, but I will say this though, bask in as much as you can, because let me tell you, they're 12 and 17 now, and it seems like yesterday they were babies. And literally my very best thing that I ever will be is mom. I'm great as a senior vice president. I like you said, I'm charismatic. I command leadership, but my best role is mom. And I know that like my 17-year-old is a senior in high school. And so I'm dealing with that right now. We got college applications due on November the 1st. We are looking at basketball recruitment. Potentially, we're doing all those things. And I keep looking at him like, how is he going to be on his own in a year? Because he doesn't even remember to set his alarm to get up in the morning for school every day. And so I would just say, take in those moments as much as you can, because they're never going to be this young ever again.
As mine was screaming at me earlier today, and she got herself a nice timeout. But after that was all done and said, I was like, come and give me a cuddle.
That's right. Get that cuddle. Get that cuddle. Like, they get older and they don't want to hug and kiss anymore. People are like, how is it that your kids aren't sick when you're sick? Because they don't want to hug and kiss no more.
I saw someone in my job that had like the progress of like a son, and it's like mommy, mama, bro,
bruh.
That's
my name now.
Yo, Grace say bro right now. He's sick.
But it's something with like boy mom.
Bro, kid. Like craziness. Well, okay, so I'm gonna go into another piece of this because we've been trying to talk to different people in different industries across all industries. And the thing that Isabel and I are super passionate about, obviously, is that we are both women of color. We both, have seen the challenge of trying to climb the corporate ladder in what we consider, a white male dominated space, right? And so I'm interested to know what challenges you feel like you may have overcome or still going through or went through as a woman of color ascending to senior management and senior executiveship?
I have to be honest and say that my career trajectory, while I may not be exactly where I am, I do have to acknowledge where I was able to arrive at the company. So I didn't start in the mail room or in the bank branch or, as an operations processor. I was able to come in as a manager with experience and so it allowed me to start at a different level where others were, well, I've been doing this since high school and I'm still not a supervisor or a team leader or anything like that. And so, I think part of, when you talk about how'd you get where you came from or how did you get to where you are today, we have to be honest about the different things. And, sometimes it's just being at the right place at the right time and knowing the right people. And it's all about who you know. So I'm really grateful for, how I was able to come into the company and kind of overcome that challenge, because even though I'm a Black female, I'm still a military officer. And so I kind of got that extra, notch. And listen, I take advantage of every leverage or every plus that that comes with me because everybody else does. Everybody else does. Because people come into jobs and I'll pull myself up by my bootstraps. No, you knew somebody and they put you in that place. You're friends with so and so, or your dad did this for you. So it starts with just acknowledging the place in which I came into the company. But then, like as I said earlier, my career got a little stagnant when I became a mom, and I kind of struggled between, do I want to get after it and stay at work till 7 or 8 o'clock at night because that kind of gave the appearance of what it took, or do I need to go home? And so a lot of times I did choose to go home, and not that I was doing a bad job, I was doing an amazing job. But I remember seeing other counterparts who did not look like me, and they were also single and they didn't have kids, or they had kids, but their wives were taking care of their kids. They got to get after it a little bit better than I could. And, progress in their careers a little bit further than I did. And so it took, some really strange things happening for our career. Our company started doing a lot of layoffs. And so my husband's position was eliminated and he took a job somewhere else, and I didn't want to leave the company, but I was angry with the company for eliminating this position. I'm like, this is your top performer, but it literally was a numbers thing. But really was, you always learn good people always land on their feet. Like he actually got something way better than what he had. But it took me getting out of my comfort zone and knowing when it was like, okay, they're not offering me anything at this point. It's time to go. And so I went somewhere else because it got to a point where I started to doubt myself and my abilities. And I allowed myself to be like, I accepted that I had gotten stagnant, and I felt like I was in a rut and I couldn't get out. And I was probably old school in my thinking. And this is why I admire younger people. Like they're loyal as long as you're loyal to them, and then they get on to the next thing. And we were raised by the generation of you get a job and you stay in your job 30 years and you get your retirement and your and so I was like, I'm going to start at this company and be here for life. And it didn't work out that way because people need you until they don't, and just understanding that don't let yourself get stagnant and always continue to reinvent yourself and brand yourself, but don't be afraid to step out on faith and go look at other opportunities. And so I transitioned to another company where they were like eating up all of my ideas and eating up, things that I brought to the table, and they were appreciating me in a way that I hadn't felt in years. And I felt so invigorated and so rejuvenated. And I was in there like changing processes and creating groups and building systems. And just, I mean, I loved it. I loved it. But as fate would have it, I'm back at the company where I started. And, and you know, money talks and opportunity talks, you know. But I'm back at the company where I started, but there's a different appreciation for who I am and what I bring to the table, all just because I left and people got to see from afar what I was doing in other places and realizing that I wasn't being utilized to the fullest that what I could do when I wasn't there previously.
That's interesting. And it's actually very funny that she says that, because that's the whole platform that Brandy and I have created Misfits Unplugged on.
Yeah.
You know, we were at a firm, we were working our asses off, you know, 40, 50, 60, 70-hour weeks to build credibility, to be seen. And we still weren't being given those opportunities to go into management, even though Brandy at the time already had her master's degree. I was working on my master's degree. And they were still not giving us a seat at the table. And it wasn't until we came together, we focused, and we went on to bigger, better things. And we're both at the two jobs that we moved on to. We were able to triple our income and now come together and build our own business to kind of help elevate people so that they can live through what we just experienced and create value for ourselves. So kudos.
And that's fantastic. That's really fantastic, because I think it's like you said, is understanding, knowing your worth, and knowing that if people aren't appreciating you where you are, there is somebody somewhere who's going to appreciate what you bring to the table. Like, don't stay there and just take whatever people are just giving you. Like, if you have a gift, you have a skill set, you know, you were hired for a reason, you know, and so know when it's time to be like, okay, I'm not growing anymore. I'm not growing in my role. You're not invested in me. It is time to go. You know, don't be afraid to go, because someone else, you know, and it's a bad analogy, but it makes sense. You know, it's one man's trash is another man's treasure, you know, and not that I'm anybody's trash or anything like that, but like I became treasure at another company and was grown and stretched and invested in ways I hadn't been in years.
That's amazing.
I hear you speak about your husband a lot, and I'm also married. So I want to understand, you know, the dynamics of navigating your leadership role, I guess in two parts. Like, do you use him as a sounding board to help you when you have tough days? And then also as a leader, how do you shut it off to be a partner instead of like dictating him to do things?
Good luck with that one, Porsche.
Two-part question.
So this is going to probably sound crazy and sound like I'm a glutton for punishment, but my husband is also a military officer and also in the finance industry. So we do the same thing, but I will tell you, one, he's my mentor, and I can't articulate that enough. He is an amazing leader. We're very different in our leadership, but I love to bounce things off of him. There is nothing like being able to find a safe space to ask a question on how to do something or how to navigate a difficult situation. And you can bounce an idea and almost kind of get an opinion about it before you actually go out and like make a mistake or, you know, fall flat on your face. And, you know, when it comes to, you know, he just happens to be my husband, but he's also kind of my mentor. He's my partner. He's my best friend. And we complement each other because we are different in our leadership styles, but he's an amazing leader. He knows my blind spots and I know his. You know, it will be anything from, let me tell you what happened to me today, to, oh, I got this really difficult situation, to, you know, hey, look at these slides, you know, and I'm typically that for him. Like, he'll be like, hey, come look at these slides. And I'm like, no, that's wrong. This is, you know, this is grammatically, and I'm like red line and everything. It don't make sense. And that's kind of off just a little bit, you know, like we really help each other. But I'll be honest with you, there are times where you feel that struggle of you've got two people climbing the corporate ladder at the same time who have these kids, and, you know, moms are moms and dads are dads. And there's not to say that there are certain roles, but stereotypically, there are certain type of roles, and even if you don't subscribe to that role, your kids do. And it literally, your kids will walk right past their father and come straight and find you on the toilet and ask you a question. It's like, did you see the man in there who was there in the hospital the day that you were born? Like, you know, you can ask him these things. You know, you can ask him where your green shirt is. I'm on the toilet. You know, so in the spirit of that,
that's so funny.
You do feel like sometimes sometimes I felt like I had to, we both have trailblazed, but he's headed for the C-suite. Like he's already there. He's already there. And I don't know if I'll make it there. Am I absolutely, you know, working to make it there? Yes, but I don't know if I'll make it there, but he's there. And I'm proud of him for that. And I just know that, you know, as a wife and a mom, sometimes I just had to be those things. And, you know, he didn't always have to be those things. Like, he's always a dad, he's always a husband, but, you know, we just have different roles. We just have different roles. What I like now, though, is that he's at a place in his career where, like, next week we've got parent-teacher conferences, and I'm like, and I think I'm going to stop mid-thought. I think I was bad at maybe letting him know about things ahead of time. And I would come on like the day, like, we got parent-teacher conference tomorrow. He's like, well, I got this big meeting tomorrow. And I'm like, well, I canceled my whole day. He's like, well, you knew to do that. I didn't know to do that. So there's communication and all of that too. Like, there were certain situations that I was creating and not giving him a chance. So now I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth at this point.
I get it though.
So like next week is parent-teacher conference. I let him know last week, and he's like, hey, I'm gonna squeeze it in however I can. We're gonna both be there. You know, so being communicative with him, but also just being able to have that sounding board and shop talk at home, very valuable. And I think it's benefited both of our careers.
So I'm going to piggyback off of that just a little bit, because I find it really interesting. You know, I like bouncing things off of my partner too. And one of the reasons I like doing it is because I feel like he's a way better negotiator than I am. In other words, like, he's able to take the emotion and everything.
They're logical and we're emotional.
Yeah. And so I know that there's statistics that actually support the fact that men are way more ambitious in career, that, you know, they're way more apt to go after a job that they're only 70% qualified for and get it, opposed to women who will wait until we 99.999%, you know, qualify or whatever. So just from a negotiation space, particularly as a Black woman, but even just as a woman in general, what tips can you give our viewers about negotiating? Maybe not as a man or like a man, but maybe like a man. I don't know. Like, should we be negotiating in this space more objectively, more hard-nosed, more like, I want what I want and, you know, deliver?
I think we should. And I think part of the battle is knowing that you can. And the reason why I say that, and Brandy, you and I talked about this, I remember taking a job and learning after the fact that I could have negotiated my salary because I never knew that I could. And a Black female taught me that. She's retired now. She's one of the toughest managers that I had, but I learned so much from her. She also taught me how to be a great business writer. I had a bad habit of writing the way that I speak. But she taught me, she was like, well, I would have, you know, I would have paid you, da, 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 da. And I was like, well, why didn't you? She was like, you didn't ask. I got you for cheap. And I was just like, ugh. Like, my heart hurt. So I'm like, damn, I'm stuck in this job for another 3 years before I can negotiate something else. I literally said, so you mean to tell me if I had a counter, you wouldn't take away the offer? She was like, no, countering is a part of the process. And it was crazy because I was already a manager. I had hired people. So then I had people who worked for me who didn't know that they could negotiate jobs. So from that day on, I made it my business, especially if it was a woman, that if you were looking for another job, listen, I'm first of all, I don't hold on to people. If you want to be with me forever, great, I love you. But if you want to go on and do something else, I love you still, because people are in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And so I enjoy people for the times that they're in my life. I don't hold them back, because one thing you have to understand is that people are never truly going to perform their best unless they're happy with what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So when I would have employees come and they would be scared, like, I applied for this job. Oh, you did? That's great. Like, listen, I don't want to get rid of you. I'm going to hate to see you go, but I think this is great. Or are you sure this is, good with your skill set and whatnot? But let's talk through this. Let's talk through some interview things. But when you get that offer, let's talk about that, because that's absolutely most important. And the one thing that I knew as a manager at that time, when my boss told me that, I knew that I had wiggle room when I hired people. I knew that, okay, well, the job is budgeted for 60, but we're going to start at 50, and see if they accept that. But it never, ever occurred to me that I should do the same for myself, and that everybody has a budget and you never start at the top. You never start at the top. And so now I negotiate every offer that I get. And I will tell you something that is non-negotiable for me is my vacation time. Once I got to 5 years, I hit them 4 weeks, and every job I went to after that. And people will tell you, oh, we start everybody at 3 weeks. We start everybody at 2 weeks. Well, you won't start me, because I get 4 weeks. I can stay here and get 4 weeks. Like that is because self-care has become very important to me now. And it wasn't before. So I do think that we need to learn how to be logical when it comes to negotiating, but also there are lots of tools out here today that exist today that did not exist when we all started. There's Glassdoor, there's LinkedIn, there's Reddit, there's all kinds of things out there that can tell you what does a person in this job with this much experience in this city and state make on average. And then you set your bar. You set your bar at least there at the starting point, but you really should set your bar higher and then land somewhere in the middle. I absolutely feel like we should always negotiate every single offer, because they have more to give.
Yes, and I see it quite often, actually, as a hiring manager, that people come in and we can have an entire team, and each person has a different, it's kind of like how they value themselves, because they can I'll ask for this, and I'm like, all right, I'll give you that. But
and let me say one more thing about that, because I came to that realization last week when I went to my residency for my executive MBA program at Howard University. We talked about executive influence and conscious leadership and things of that nature, but we also talked about knowing your worth. And a lot of times, if you've been in an environment where you didn't grow up with much and you didn't come from a middle-class family, or you didn't have a lot growing up, you think to yourself, well, they've offered me this, and this is more money than I've ever made in my life, so I'm going to take it. But that doesn't mean that they are paying you what you're worth, and they're paying you what you're going to be doing. And really, it is in your best interest to get as much as you can get day one in the door, because after that, it's 2.5%, 3% at a time until another opportunity comes up. And even then, as you all know, there are certain parameters when you promote internally into new roles. It's automatic 10%, nothing else, and things of that nature. So it's in your best interest to do your research, know your worth, set your price, and get as much as you can get day one.
You just gave me next week's content.
What I will tell you also is that really good companies have benchmarking of what the role is. So they have low, medium, and high. So a really good company, so like the company I work for, they won't let you come in at 50 if the medium, if the low, even the lower benchmark is 65. They're going to meet you at 65, and if you're that person, you're super happy. Yeah. So and I don't know about all states, but I know in New York State, New Jersey, it's required for you to post the range, that benchmark range in the job description. So make sure you're not just reading the top, responsibilities, go all the way to the bottom. And that is the salary range that's your story.
Well, listen, I'll throw a little other tidbit in here too, because I left corporate, which are like the major companies or whatever, because of that redlining and that red tape that you have to go through. I find that smaller companies who are also doing well have a lot of money to give to very
Oh yeah.
talented individuals, and you don't have to go through the red tape of, you
Yeah.
know, all of those different percentages and stuff. So, you know, do your research, obviously, in your industry. But if you find that you keep getting like this ceiling, figure
Yeah.
out what skills you have that you might be able to transfer to a smaller company. You might have to wear more hats,
Yep.
but you know, there's more opportunity to move up and do more in a
Yep.
faster pace than
Well,
not.
that's exactly what I did when I left the first bank that I was at and went to the second bank. It was a much smaller regional bank, and I did have to wear more hats, but I also got more exposure.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knew who I was at the company. The CEO knew me by name, and really, that's what took my base salary over the hump that I was trying to. We gotta say, well, I gotta make 6 figures. That's what kind of me over to that hump, was going to that smaller company and being able to make a difference and take your big bank ideas to a smaller company and apply them. And then I was able to return back, to another, the company that I started off with, and it was a great offer that I received. But yeah, like, don't be afraid, like, don't name chase companies. And I'm learning even now to even get comfortable about entertaining like startups and things of that nature. Like, that sounds scary, but I mean, there's just so much innovation and so many new things that are just popping off, left and right in these times that just, that didn't exist 15, 20 years ago, that, don't be afraid of those things.
So we usually end the episode with words of wisdom. So if you, Porsche, were speaking to either your younger self or the woman creating your career, what would your advice that you would give yourself?
We live in really interesting times where you could almost learn how to take something that you love and market it and sell it. And so I would say, and this is pretty difficult because if you're 18, 19, 20 something years old, you really don't know what you want to do, but find what it is that makes you passionate and see how you can market that thing. Like, don't be afraid to be entrepreneurial minded. I think that is definitely the difference between, so I'm on the cusp. I'm a Gen X millennial. Like, some books say we're Gen Xers, some books say we're millennials, but even if we're millennials, we're old millennials, as they call us. But you've got the younger millennials, and then you've got Gen Z, where they're very entrepreneurial minded, and they are just, let me tell you something, they're busting America wide open. Like, these traditional corporate jobs, like, they're not about that. And they're making 6 figures already, not going to college, or maybe going to college. And they're, on TikTok and Instagram. And I'm just not talking about like being an influencer. It's finding something that I love and finding the need and filling the need. And you market filling the need. And so that would be my advice to a young aspiring professional, is to, find what it is that you love and find a way to make it, profit you and create a lifestyle for you. And don't allow yourself to get, like, I call them the golden cuffs. So be careful getting in a job and you're like, oh, this is exciting and I'm making all this money. And you get to a point where you lock yourself in, you lock yourself in those golden cuffs. And it's like, man, now I got to replace X income, and how am I going to find something that I love? Like, I love to help people. It's like, how am I going to find out how to, help people? Nonprofits, that's a nonprofit space. You're not profiting in that space, but, just finding something that you love, finding the need and filling it for others and marketing that. Like, I can't stress that enough. There are so many different ways to be successful. There's so many different ways to make money. And my path doesn't have to be your path. It doesn't have to be the next person's path. I'm not saying you got to go to the Army. You got to go work at a bank, and you got to be in charge of these people and be a senior vice president. Like, that is a path, but that is not the path. That's not the only path. There's so many different ways. And then the other thing is understanding that actually your path to success is not always linear. Sometimes it's horizontal and it looks like scribble scrabble, as our kids would say, and knowing what's going on to the left and to the right of you, because you never know when you get to work one day and they say that person is gone and now you got their team and yours and their team too. And that literally happened to me about 4 years ago. 2 people to the left and to the right of me were gone in an instant. And it was like, you got all this work and all these people, and now you got to run with it. And if I never built relationships or even paid attention to what they were doing, I wouldn't have been successful in being able to do that.
It has been so amazing talking to you, and I wish we could do more, but I got to go get my son. So
Yeah.
tell people.
It's only 4:53 here, so it's getting late for y'all.
Not good. So tell people who would either want to hire you or work for you where they can find you.
You can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Porsche Wilson, spelled like the car. And so if you want to reach out, if you want to, and I'm not necessarily, because this is out in the world, not necessarily looking for an opportunity, but there's nothing ever wrong with talking about anything. But most importantly, if you want to learn more about what I do and how to get into what it is that I'm doing, you can reach me on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much for coming on our show today,
Porsche.
Porsche.